What's up, debating metalheads, and welcome back to Debating Metal. I am Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, your host, joined by my co-host Chris K. Last episode, we gave you our take on albums that were re-released after their initial debut for one reason or another. Well, today we're expanding on that list of albums with part 2 of Remixed, Remastered, and Re-Released.
Today we're taking a look at albums that are more special edition than the re-releases we talked about the last episode. These include anniversary editions, deluxe editions, and even one that included a platinum award in its sleeve.
All right, so without any further ado, sit back, relax, turn it up to 11, and let the debate begin. Chris, we have 6 new albums that we're going to talk about. Well, not new albums, but 6 different albums than from the last episode.
Some quite old.
Say what?
Some quite old even.
Yes, some quite old. But the funny thing about them is that only one of them is based on a debut album. Well, actually, that's not true. Now I think about it, because the first artist that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about their debut album. But it's the singer himself was not debuting. But we'll get into that in a second. And the albums are more kind of like we just mentioned, special editions, anniversary editions, and what the artist chose to do was really just kind of change it up. You know, rather than go out with the 25th anniversary deluxe edition, it's just straight remastered and it's got a couple of bonus tracks. They went ahead and did full-blown remixes, which of course, as we mentioned in the previous episode, forces them to have a remaster of that. So what would, before we get further along, I mean, is there anything you want to say about those?
Well, I guess some of these technically had a couple different remasters. I think we're talking mostly about the most predominant versions, or even sometimes the best versions. I think 2 of them in particular that we're going to mention have multiple remasters.
Yes, I think so too. So anyway, let's get on with it. Let's talk about these bands. Like I said, there's 6 bands. The first band that we're going to talk about is actually Fight. And for those of you who may or may not know, Rob Halford left Judas Priest in 1992 and formed the band. Yes, he formed the band Fight in 1990. No, he never left. It was just a side project. Who was that singer there in the mid-90s?
Some ripper.
Some ripoff. Anyway, so Rob,
in all these years, how have I never thought of ripoff?
Well,
I mean, maybe that's because I like Tim Ripper Owens, but yeah, that's an easy one. Wow.
I you know what? And it's funny too. Now that I think about it, I've never heard it before.
Really?
Because that's what he was. He was a Rob clone.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean,
he did have he had his own tone, but he was a Rob clone. Anyway, speaking of Rob Halford, he formed a band, Fight, in 1993, and in that band, he formed it with Scott Travis. So he basically took Scott Travis from Judas Priest. They put together a band with a bunch of guys, if I'm not mistaken, from the Phoenix area. They released an album called War of Words. And so it was technically their debut. And there wasn't anything wrong with it. It wasn't like a demo sounding kind of album. It was a full-blown, full production, full budget type of album. But 15 years later, they decide to do a remix of it. So to kind of give a little quick background on the album, it was originally released in 1993 on Epic Records. It was produced by Rob Halford, co-produced by Addy Baugh, or Bow, I think is the last name. And it was mixed and mastered by Rob Halford and Addy Baugh. The 2008 remastered edition was released in 2008. Anyway, and it was remixed by Roy Z and remastered by Andy Horn. So, what were your thoughts on it when you gave it a listen?
So I really always heard the original. I've had both versions for quite a while. But so I I don't really feel like this one was super necessary. It didn't change a whole lot, and I felt like to some extent it kind of took a little bit of the punch out of it. Um, but overall, I think both versions sound fine. It's kind of an oddity to me. It's like maybe there was something there that as the musicians they heard like I don't really quite like this and we should alter this a little bit. But I don't really like listening to the album. I never thought, I wish this was a little stronger. I wish this was mixed a little different. I always liked the original cut.
The original release was kind of it was one of those things. I loved it from the beginning. As soon as I heard it, I was a huge fan. And there was something very metal about the sound of the album.
Yes.
It was one of those things that he's like, yeah, this is a metal album just by hearing it. But when you then listen to the remix version that came out, you realize how much thicker that new version is, but it doesn't take away anything from the songs themselves. It's you're right in that they're not drastically different, and they don't not one's not way better than the other. I
They're just
do.
different, and it's weird to say, and they're just different than each other.
Right. And it was funny, for the longest time, I dismissed this remix as completely unnecessary. I didn't like it the first time I heard it. But I guess I didn't pay that much attention to it. But when we started doing this, the series for these remixes and stuff like that, I started listening to it, and I paid attention to it. And I'm like, you know what? This is not bad. This is not as bad as I thought it was, or even to counter that, this is better than I thought it was.
Mm.
And there's points in time from the original that I prefer to listen to the original, but this remix version, one thing I took notice of right away was that although on the original, when you listen to the songs and you hear the bass lines, they cut through the mix and you can hear the actual bass being played. On the remix version, you feel the bass more. You don't hear it as much, but you definitely you feel the bottom end. You can hear it a little bit, especially if your hearing is good, because when your hearing goes bad when you get older or from abuse, you tend to only be able to feel bass as opposed to hearing it. You start losing frequencies at the bottom and the top of the range. So I thought that was pretty cool. I like that because I understand so much more now about how to record bass, just through listening to producers and stuff like that. And it's to me, I like the way the bass sounds on the remix. The other thing too is I like the fact that the drums sound more natural on this, because they take away some of the effects. They take away the reverb that makes it sound like it's in this big giant hall.
Mhm.
Now it sounds like it's in the room next door to you, and it's like in your face in that regards. I like that. Same thing with Rob's vocals. They take away the reverb and they made it sound like he's right there in front of you. That is what I like about it.
No, I get that. It's almost a different experience.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
one they were trying to make it feel more grandiose, and the other one feels more intimate in a sense.
Exactly. That those are the exact words, because that the whole grandiose thing, you can specifically tell during the song Immortal Sin. There's a part about 2.5 minutes, almost 3 minutes into the song, where there's this little breakdown part where he says he says the line, and it's all the music is stripped. It's just him and the vocals. Well, obviously, um, it's just him, and specifically just Rob, and he drags out the last vowel, or the last sound of the word that he's saying, and then in comes Scott Travis with the drums. He's hitting the bass drums, toms, and all that, and you can hear Rob's voice with all the reverb on it, and then the drums come in and it sounds like it's just in this big hall. But when you hear the remix version, it's just like it's right there.
Yeah.
And especially listening to it on headphones, it sounds like Rob is literally just talking right in your ear as if he was standing next to you. And then that drum kicks in, and it's like bombastic yet intimate, like you say. So I liked it. I definitely have changed my mind about how I feel about this particular remix.
It's definitely interesting. I'll have to kind of listen again in the context of what you're saying. Because like I said, it's one of those things where I also have dismissed it to some degree as unnecessary. But the way you're describing it, it does ring true as far as like how um it kind of cuts in a different way. Like just what you said with Immortal Sin. It's like you're right. It does sound much more clear, much more personal. And so, I think each version is definitely worth listening to. I don't really necessarily feel like one is better than the other. But you may feel differently if you've never listened to the album too. I would actually be very curious to see what people think.
The one cool thing about it is this is the type of thing where someone can choose one over the other and not be wrong. Everyone has a different style of which they like to absorb their music, in the way they listen to it. And I'm not talking about, I listen to it on headphones or I listen to it in my car. It's just, some people prefer a certain type of sound. And so this actually gives you two different kinds of sounds, one more intimate and one more bombastic, or what was the word you chose earlier?
Grandiose.
More grandiose. So yeah, so it's a really good way to compare the two. And the one thing I wanted to say about the album too is, as we mention all the time about all these remixes, we always say that the guitars sound thicker. In this one, the guitars on the original mix were way up front. And they had like that buzzsaw kind of chainsaw sound to them, which was really cool. But when I compared it side by side, that sounded so much thinner, but yet very metallic, which I guess is the sound that they were going for. But the remix, what I like about it, it brings it up to the same level as the drums for whatever, or brings it actually. Let me take that back. It brings the drums up to the same level as the guitars, because the drums in the original were definitely a little bit lower. And what I like about that is because, while they technically occupy the same space, the frequencies are slightly, one higher than the other. So they're able to basically coexist in that high part of the mix. And so that's what I think what makes this one sound so good. So, what better, in that kind of opinion. But again, it's all up to you, the listener.
Agreed.
So Fight's second album, they did the same thing for. So A Small Deadly Space came out 2 years later in 1995, and they gave it the same treatment. They did a remix for it. So we're just touching upon this album real quick. The original album had a hidden bonus track at the end. The remix version took that off. And the other thing that the remix version did is they rearranged the songs on the album. I don't know if they felt it was better flow or not. I recall Rob saying something that he didn't understand why it was changed, but he felt it was fine. And then they changed the artwork. They actually changed the artwork for both albums, but the War of Words.
The War of Words is closer. They just
Yeah.
added some flames and some color to it because it was just black and white. And then Small Deadly
Exactly.
Space is massively different.
Yeah, it's completely different. It's some guy's teeth chewing on a bar or something like that is what it looks like to me, compared to the.
I never realized that's what it was.
I looked at it closely and I noticed it was that.
For all this time, I never realized that was. I mean, the actual cover is much more,
The actual cover is like artwork.
Yeah.
Somebody's artist thing or whatever. But it's either one is fine. They both sound pretty good. So
I probably would have done something different for the original. I mean, for the original cover, because they had such a good logo for the band, and then they just kind of throw it out and they put some odd font on there.
Yeah, that first logo was super cool.
Yeah, and they used it for the remake or the remastered version. It's just not a very good, like, the artwork's okay, it's fine. It just doesn't, like, when I look at it, I don't think fight, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't give you any balls.
Yeah.
But it's Rob Halford for you.
All right.
So anyway,
If anything, Rob Alford has more balls and plenty of balls. So
I'm not talking about Rob's balls anymore. All right. Our next album that we're going to talk about is Disturbed and The Sickness, their debut album. So yeah, I guess, kind of wrong. Most of these albums are about debuts.
yeah, I was going to say, like, there's The Sickness, there's
I was completely wrong.
more
I
words.
was
There's one we're going to talk about in a bit.
That's right. I'm a dumbass. Okay. Disturbs The Sickness, originally released March 7th, 2000 on Giant Reprise Records. It was produced and engineered by Johnny Kay, mixed by Andy Wallace, and mastered by Howie Weinberg. And the reason I bring up mastered by Howie Weinberg is Howie's a pretty big name in the mastering industry. So for music, and I just mentioned that because the remaster was done by Ted Jensen, and his name is going to pop up a couple times. The 10th anniversary edition was released March 23rd, 2010, almost 10 years to the day. Remixed by Neil Avron, remastered by Ted Jensen, as I previously mentioned. This is an anniversary edition, so it goes with what we said at the beginning. And it was also the first time this album was released on vinyl, and they released it as the anniversary remixed edition. And I have that. One of the few newer albums that I have. I prefer to get. I prefer to try to buy the old albums from the back in the day, back in my day, the 80s, as the originals. If I can't get the originals and there's a re-release that's available, I'll think about it. But
Yeah, I understand that.
Our friend Matt from Miami refuses to buy any 180 gram vinyl because he just wants what it was supposed to sound like when you first bought it. So keep a crappy stereo, and then you'll really make it sound like it did when you were a kid.
Yeah, if I could only get my Sony boombox.
Man, my first stereo was like it not even a stereo. My first portable cassette player it wasn't even a boombox per se. It was like one speaker. It was gray with black knobs, and it almost looked military-like. It's really hard to describe. Almost looked like Lego to some degree. It was weird.
My first one was one of those ones that had the buttons on the front, and there was a cassette player right behind it, and it had one speaker sitting behind that. It was like flat. It almost looked like a game console. It was, not good.
Is it ever good, the first one?
No, but we liked it back then. So
well, we had to. All right. So speaking of the Disturbed Sickness album, in my opinion, the overall sound of the remixed album sounds a little drier, a little clearer. The drums sound much more real. So they sound like acoustic drums. They sound like they're in your living room. The original album, this is so strange for me. And I know you're not a big fan of Disturbed, but the original album, for whatever reason, it's just so odd. I never realized there was a drummer. I always felt like it was electronic. It wasn't. And obviously I tapped my hands to the drum, but there was something about the fact that I didn't realize a drummer physically existed for Disturbed. It was, I don't know what it was. And then I saw a video and they were playing live. And I'm like, oh, look, they got a drummer, and I'm like, it was just this weird connotation that I had, that I felt like it was mostly electronic, because there's a lot of electronic noises in some of the songs that they play. And the drums don't always sound like natural acoustic drums. But that's the one thing I like about this remixed edition, is that they sound like real drums. Like there's a real drummer playing them. I don't know what it is. I am completely, open to the criticism that I'm stupid for hearing it this way, but that's just the way I always interpreted it. I don't know.
So
what did you get from it?
So in a lot of ways, I agree with you as far as like I think the overall sound is better on the remix. One thing I think that it is lacking on is the vocals got pushed back a bit. I think they were trying to even out the sound a bit more, but I don't think that was a good choice because um his vocals being pushed a bit more forward gave it a little bit more distinct sound. The other thing I noticed that was like some of the fuzziness of the original recording was corrected on the remaster. So it does sound better overall as a whole.
Okay, I can see that. You know, for the most part, the songs were left pretty much as the same original length. They didn't like
Yeah, I didn't notice much of a difference
so,
as a whole.
and I found it kind of odd that so, you know, now that I think about it, it makes sense because when you're doing something in Pro Tools, and I put it that way, when you're doing a digital recording, um, obviously you're playing acoustic instruments, you're playing drums, you're playing guitar, you're playing bass, okay, but you're recording it into a computer rather than onto tape.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have these songs and you hit play or hit record and then you end, okay, remix or not remix, or original or not original, it's only going to be so long. Whereas when you had tape, you press record, tape starts spinning, and then you hit stop at some point, right? But the tape, you always have extra tape at the end because you need something for the tape to grab onto. So there's always extra tape at the end. And so older versions, older songs that were done before the digital era, when you remix them or you remaster them, well, not the remaster, when you remix them, you end up having a time change, a change of time by a few seconds. So it just dawned on me that that's the reason why all these songs are typically the same length and the same, or there's no change in the actual time, because that's it. There's your track. Well, let me pull up, from this folder. Let me pull up, Stupefy. Well, Stupefy is 4 minutes, 4 seconds, or whatever the length is. It's not going to change. Remix, remastered or not, it's never going to change. So that just literally dawned on me while we're talking about this. And because I made mention that, they didn't change the length of the songs. I mentioned it with the fight. I mentioned it on this one. And it's because although fight was recorded at the beginning stages of the digital era, the early 90s, it was it had been transferred onto a digital platform and then kept that way. So, although who knows? Maybe they did. Maybe Roy Z whipped out the original 2-inch tapes. Who knows?
No.
So anyhow, this special edition, or this 10th anniversary edition of The Sickness, also came along with 2 additional songs, one called God of the Mind and A Welcome Burden. God of the Mind was originally featured on the movie, on the Valentine soundtrack, and it was released in 2002. Excuse me. And it was released on the 2002 reissue of The Sickness. And The Welcome Burden was originally featured on the soundtrack for Dracula 2000 and later released on the Lost Children B-Sides compilation in 2011. So they gave you a little bit of goodies. So you got two bonus tracks and a completely remixed album. So that's not a bad thing for a 10th anniversary edition.
Yeah, not bad. I feel like if you're doing an anniversary edition, it should have some kind of extras. I mean, what else is the point if it's an anniversary? Like, even if it's just a bonus disc of extras or something like that, I feel like it needs something.
Yeah, I mean, look, these guys, if you've noticed when bands put out these special editions of certain albums, they put out a lot of live tracks, demos, and stuff like that. That doesn't cost them anything. It costs minimal studio time. So if you're going to sit there and say, "Oh, well, it cost me $500 to do this," and you know, you're going to say, "Well, I'm going to charge a full price second disc," you're just being a dick at this point, okay? Because most of these bands don't have these big contracts like Aerosmith had, you know, with the $35 million contract that they signed with Sony. They have their contract where they recoup their money for whatever reason, whatever it is. So a lot of these bonus tracks, I mean, look, give the fans something. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on our Big Four, but give the fans something that they can grab onto. And quite honestly, even though this had 2 bonus tracks, both of those bonus tracks were available. And so even though The Lost Children came out the next year even though A Welcome Burden came out on The Lost Children the following year, it's still one of those things where it had already been heard, it had already been released, so it wasn't previously unreleased or anything like that. I think sometimes you should give fans a little bit more, but who am I to say?
Again, like I said, I feel like it's necessary.
Right. Okay. So moving on. Our next album we're going to talk about is Temple of the Dog. Again, a debut album. And I don't look at this so much as a debut album, so much as it was just a side project that ended up having, you know, an album released, because they never put anything else out afterward. So it wasn't like, you know, they were expected to be a band forever, because they knew they were in 2 different bands. So Temple of the Dog was originally released on April 15th, 1991 on A&M Records. It was produced by Rick Parashar and Temple of the Dog. It was mixed by Rick Parashar, and it was mastered by Ken Perry and Rick Parashar. The 25th anniversary Super Deluxe Edition was released in 2016, and it was remixed by Brendan O'Brien. So now we're talking 25 years later, we get a remixed special edition of this album. What were your thoughts on this?
So this was another one where I was like a little confused as to why they did a remix. I guess it's because, you know, it was the 25th anniversary. It's a big deal. And in some ways, a 25th anniversary, 30th anniversary, those are always a little bit of a chance to have a cash grab. But Brendan O'Brien worked on it, who had worked on like Pearl Jam's materials as well. So it makes sense that you know, he'd get involved and do a proper remix, considering his you know, affiliation with the grunge scene. Overall, I think it's a little bit better quality. Like I think it sounds a little more streamlined in a way. But I think it's not necessary, being that it's grunge also. You know, grunge is like that word, you know, it really defines the movement in a way. I know not all the guys in there like it, but neither did the hair band guys, and it does define that as well. So it's almost like it's not necessary, because there is that idea of the rawness of some of the grunge music, but at the same time, you can't deny when you put it on, you go, okay, this sounds a little nicer, a little crisper.
I like the fact that you used the word crisper, because what I realized when I was listening to this stuff, that grunge, let me put it this way, the more polished bands of the grunge scene have a particular sound. Yeah. And I've noticed I've noticed it more when I was going through this exercise of listening to some of these albums, and I'm like, oh shit, I never really noticed that. And what the remix did was it took away that sound and refreshed it with a more natural drum sound. Even though the original sounds like drums, it sounds like a natural drum sound. It's just a different tone, and
it in no way sounds like a drum track.
Right, no, it's not. It's not something where it's, you know, like it's a triggered snare that sounds completely different. Not like that.
Yeah.
but there's something about the like sort of like how nowadays the modern snare sound sucks ass, okay, and so many bands use it,
Wait.
okay. This is the era that we're in. So in the era of grunge, they had a particular snare sound, they had a particular drum sound that a lot of bands shared. It was because of the producer. So the producer sets up the mic the same way, he uses the same mics, he does the same tweaks and stuff like that. Even though the playing is different, the attack is different from the actual drummer, there are, and he may use a different size drum, a snare drum, he may use a different size bass drum. There's a similar tonality to all those drums. What this album did was kind of take that and twist it to make it seem like it's, for lack of a better term, more real. Same thing we mentioned with Fight and with Disturbed.
A
It
less
sounds like it's,
modified sound.
yeah, it's more like it's in your living room kind of thing, like you're listening to a real drum set in your living room. And so that's what I liked about it, because it kind of took it away from being grunge and made it made it contemporary. Put it that way.
Yeah, it has a different sound, and
I mean, the bass drum has more punch. The snare sounds more realistic, like as I've just mentioned. And so vocally, the other thing too is, like in this particular case, Chris Cornell sounds more up in the mix. There's a slight dryness to his tone, and yet at the same time, there's an ambience to the sound. So that's a really good recording technique, because how can you sound dry yet sound ambient at the same time? That's a really cool technique, and I liked the way that came across on this album.
yeah, I think specifically like with the vocals, and that's more what I was referring to with the crisper sound.
Mhm.
Is everything is more defined, I guess is a way to put it, where you can hear there's no muddiness to it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. So one of the cool
Each
things
part is
this
separate. Is and so sorry to interrupt, but like
no, it's fine.
that's sometimes when you're listening to an album and you hear like um you hear the overall sound, but you can't tell each instrument apart. Like you're just getting
Mhm.
that is less of an effect there, and everything is more defined on the
Good. Yeah, and that's, I think when you set out to do a project like this, that's got to be the goal. To remove some of the muddiness. And it wasn't a muddy album
not
by any means, but I guess it is to more to redefine the instruments and clarify them so that it all sounds
yeah.
clear to the listener. And yeah, I agree with that. The 2016 Super Deluxe Edition that came out. So there was the first disc, which was the original album remixed, and then they added 3 different mixes. So they took 3 songs and they had Adam Casper remix those. So not only did you get the regular album completely remixed by Brendan O'Brien, but then you get 3 additional songs that were remixed by Adam Casper. Disc 2 had demos and outtakes from the recording sessions, as well as disc 3 was a DVD with some live stuff. I want to say that this is either Soundgarden joined by some guys from Pearl Jam, or Pearl Jam joined by Chris Cornell. It doesn't say, and I did not investigate deep enough to determine whether or not some of this stuff was either or. And in some cases, this may have, being that it was 1990, this was actually the band playing some shows back in the day. But the ones that are more later, like 2011 and 2015, I believe, I don't know if that was a reunion of sorts.
They did.
It may have been.
I mean, they had multiple reunions, right? They did the one off in 2014, so it could have been stuff from that time period. I really,
Right.
yeah, I didn't see any info, like without having the album directly in front of me. I didn't see any info that it was anything different than Temple of the Dog. So
Right. So, like looking at the dates, on this live stuff, November 13th, 1990, I can almost guarantee that is Temple of the Dog. That's the band, because Pearl Jam hadn't come out with their album yet.
yeah, the
And
92
Soundgarden
stuff would also be that. Yeah.
So the Lollapalooza one from '92, Hunger Strike, that one's a curious one because Soundgarden and Pearl Jam played on the same bill in Lollapalooza. So the question is, who was playing with who? I don't believe there was a Temple reunion so much as it was Pearl Jam.
Well, they were active from 90 to 92, technically. And then, so it could have been within that breadth. And then they actually were, again, active in 2016. They had a one-off reunion in 2011. And that's probably where that 2011
Right, the live at Alpine Valley, yeah. So yeah, maybe it more than likely was that whole reunion thing. All right, so and the last thing that was on that album was a Blu-ray 5.1 audio edition on disc number 4. So, and that included some stuff that was live as well. So they give you a bunch of stuff, which that's cool. See, that's the kind of thing you're supposed to get. You're supposed to get all those bonus tracks. Now, mind you, in this particular case, it's a little bit more expensive. It's probably a $20 CD, which, okay, $20 or maybe it was $30. I don't know.
You're getting your money's worth for 4 discs.
Right. I think you're getting your money's worth. And I don't know if it was $20 or not, but I don't have it. I wish I did, but I'd like to get my hands on this at some point. So that brings us to Twisted Sister and their debut album. I totally am eating my words on this. Their debut album, Under the Blade, originally released in September 1982 on Secret Records. It was produced by Pete Way and assisted by Mark Mendoza and Dee Snider. The remixed edition was released on June 13th, 1985 on Atlantic Records, and it was remixed by Mark Mendoza and Denny McNerney. And it was mastered at Sterling Sound. It doesn't say who remastered it, but it just says it was mastered at Sterling Sound. Actually, it doesn't even say that. I looked today when I was writing the notes for this shit, and there's a stamp that Sterling Sound used to use on the vinyl. And they would put the little tiny, the fucking thing looks like a fingernail, like the excess point of a fingernail. That's how small it is. But it says Sterling. So that's when you know it was mastered at Sterling Sound. And this album also had a special edition that came out with a DVD that was released on March 31st, 2016, and that was remastered by Scott Hull. That remaster is the original version of the album, not the remix. But we're here to talk about
re-released. I mean, it was remixed by Razor Ramon.
Oh no, no, Hull, not Hall, not Hull, but Hull.
Yeah, hey yo, come in here and remix your album.
From Twisted Sister. Okay. All right. So let me talk a little bit about this thing, and then I'll get your feedback on this. The funny thing about this particular album is there's a connotation with this album that that this remix was an abomination to the original release, and more fans seem to agree with the fact that it was an abomination than agree with the fact that it was a good thing.
Okay, so I wasn't alone.
No, and quite honestly, like I listened to it. There are really good things about the remix.
No, there's not.
Yes, there are. Okay, you know what? It reminds me a lot of Too Fast for Love with Motley Crue. That you listen to the original mix, the Leather Records version, and you say, "Oh, this is great. This is perfect." You don't. What do you need to improve? But then when you listen to the remix, you go, "Oh, well, it's thicker guitars, fatter bass, drums sound better." That's what happened with this one. But so many people were so in love with that raw sound that the original gave off that they didn't like the slick production that the remix had. And there's parts to it that I say yes, and there's parts to it that I say no. There's parts of it that I really, really like the original, and then there's a couple of times I'm like, yeah, I wish it would have had a little bit more punch here, like the remix. So that's my take on it. The remix album was available on cassette and LP, advertised as Twisted Sister's first LP, previously available only as an import, or so said the hype sticker. And then the album itself, the remix album, has a little permanent little hype sticker on the corner. It's not even a sticker, it's just literally part of the artwork, that says Remixed Edition includes bonus track I'll Never Grow Up Now. So you already mentioned that you think it's an abomination. So give me your opinion on what is wrong with the remix.
So I think abomination's maybe a little harsh. But my problem with it is like the drums aren't as loud. The guitars don't like sting as much. It feels like they took everything and they toned it down. Like they just were like, let's make it boring. And I don't know if the attempt was to make it sound a little bit more commercial and less heavy. I don't really understand what the intention was. The best thing that I can say about it is it does have the I'll Never Grow Up Now single added into it, which is a good song. So that is a plus.
It's a catchy as shit song.
Yeah, it's just it does not have that raw power that the original does, and I already think that Twisted Sister for me sometimes just never like really grabbed me. This is one of the albums that I think has that raw power that can, but the remix just really takes away everything that really appeals to me. So I think it's unnecessary, aside from adding that one song in. I wish they hadn't messed with the mix.
So I can agree with you on a lot of points that you just made. But what I like about the remix is that there's two things. So one part about what I like about the remix is also the part that kind of makes it suck. And I'll explain. The drums
just sounds funny.
It does, and I get it. The drums sound better to me on the remix. However, the over compression to make it sound even killed the dynamics. So even though the snare sounds crisp, even though the bass drum sounds fuller and doesn't sound like it's a bass drum with a pillow in it, it took away from the impact that the drums originally had. They sound better, but they sound constrained as well.
Yes, it's like they tried to make it more effective, but they just took it in the wrong direction.
I mean, if they wouldn't have compressed it as much and they would have let it breathe more,
agreed,
while still changing the sound, it probably would have been a lot better.
Agreed. I'm on the same page with you there. There's things they could have done to make it more effective. Hell, they may have had to re-record the drums to make it more effective. I don't know, but what the decision they did make just makes it sound weak.
Right, and I agree with that. There's definitely
it's like you took David Lee Roth off, and you were like, "Well, we'll put Don Dokken on." Now, Don Dokken now, not like 80s.
Oh God, jeez. Even then, though, it's Don's voice was never powerful, but I agree with this. It's the remix does take away a lot of the rawness, a lot of the power that it had behind it.
Yeah.
So that is part of it. So end effect or end result is you got a nice crisp sounding album. It sounds clear. It sounds fresh, but at the same time, it's so compressed that there's no up and down. There's no dynamics. There's no room for anything to breathe. That it doesn't sound fun anymore. Like like you were saying. So that's the good and the bad about it. Is and some people might find that fine. Instead they say, "Oh, I'd rather hear the clear drums." They don't care whether or not the snap is snappier or the snap of the snare drum had a particular tone that everyone kind of was used to, and it was changed. some people, oh, I can get this now in America without having to pay $30 for it in import. Oh, okay, let me buy this, and they don't realize that the original sounded different. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, one thing I did notice on it, Dee's voice is definitely drier on the original and a little bit more up in the mix. And again, that's part of the compression that they're evening out everything. The added effects that's on Dee's vocals, again, like you said, take away from the intensity from which he sang. And that's a shame, because that's probably the biggest thing about Dee Snider and Twisted Sister is the intensity with which he sings.
Dee has a very unique voice, and taking away anything from his voice is a detriment to Twisted Sister, I would say.
Correct, exactly. The big funny thing, like one thing to note on Dee's vocals, on the song "Shoot 'Em Down." Okay, there's a line: "If they want to play, then let's make them pay. Shoot them down with a fucking gun." On the remix, that plays out. Shoot them down with a fucking gun. And it comes through. But on the original, I don't know what they were trying to achieve. It almost feels like they were trying to edit or self-edit, or whoever, I guess Pete Way or whoever mixed it. They literally muffled out fucking the word fucking during that part. So it almost sounds like whoever was singing Dee was holding back the word. Like when you're talking to someone and you don't want to say the word fuck, you just like, so, yeah, how was your fucking day? And you have this emphasis on the word after it that usually not supposed to be so emphatic.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird, and I'm like, oh, well, at least they put back the way it was originally supposed to be. That's probably the best thing on the release, other than I'll Never Grow Up Now.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I'll Never Grow Up Now. The funny thing about that is it's a remixed version that's on that on that album, remixed from the original 1979 release. It sounds good. I don't think I've ever heard the original mix of I'll Never Grow Up Now, because it does appear later on Club Days Volume 1, and I believe that is the remixed version that's on there. It's not the original 1979 version. So who knows? But, I'm a big fan of this first album. So anybody who is a fan of the first album out there and doesn't know that there's a CD DVD release remaster of the original mix, it's out there. It's probably a collector's edition now. The DVD is them playing live, I believe, in Donington. So it's some really cool stuff that's on there. And then it also includes the original Secret Records 4-song EP Rough Cuts as bonus tracks. That's also a really cool addition to it.
Okay.
All right. So that brings us to, we have two more bands that we're talking about. And this brings us to probably the two biggest bands that are on this list. What can I say? Megadeth. Killing is my business, and business is good. Originally released June 12th, 1985 on Combat Records. It was produced by Dave Mustaine and Carrot Faye. I want to say that's the way you say the name. It was co-produced by Megadeth.
I think it was Carrot Top.
No. This album was remixed.
I think Dave would kill him if he had to work with him.
I know, right? This was remixed in 2002 and was released as the 2002 Remixed Deluxe Edition. It was remixed by Bill Kennedy. Pro Tools was done by Chris Vrenna of Nine Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson fame, and remastered by Tom Baker. It was once again remixed and re-released in 2018 as the Final Kill Edition that came out June 8th, 2018, remixed by Mark Lewis and remastered by Ted Jensen, as we mentioned earlier. So this is a really interesting comparison. There's 3 versions of this. And each version has one thing majorly different than the other. And we'll get to that in a second. You're a bigger Megadeth fan than I am. What do you have to say about this?
So this is an album that I never really appealed to me a lot. Like I like certain things about it. I think they obviously hit their stride after. Um, it's something I have in common with Lars. Um, so so man, I don't know. This one's a tough one because like so the original version obviously has its issues. Um, but I still prefer the versions of those songs. Like I just wish they would have obviously there's the issue with the Lee Hazelwood, right? Like he didn't think that the lyrics for these boots were appropriate, so they had to beep them out for the second version, the 2002 re-release. Then just a few years back, 2018, they do the Final Kill remaster. That's crazy to me that that was 2018. It feels like it was a lot sooner, or a lot more recently. But regardless, then they basically redid the song entirely, um, with the original Lee Hazelwood lyrics. So there's three versions of that song. I'm gonna always kind of prefer the original because that's what was intended. I think the second best version is at least the new one because at least you get to hear all of it. And
Get to hear them sing,
yeah,
as opposed to beep,
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 yeah.
beep, beep,
Screw the beeping.
Like
But
they could have just removed the fucking vocals and made it an instrumental or something. It just the whole beeping. The worst part about it is that it literally covers the music.
it's terrible.
So, like, if they would have beeped the words, but at least let the music play, which could have been done, okay, that would have at least alleviated some of that stupidity.
It would have helped. Yeah.
It would have helped a lot.
It was unlistenable, honestly. The 2002 version, I really didn't like it. I kept my original, and I did not have the 2002 version for a long time. But I do really like the Final Kill remaster. I think that's to me the definitive version of the album. It sounds the best. I know they changed the track listing essentially by taking these boots from being track 4, putting it at the end as track 8. Other than that, everything's still in the same order. Um, you know, not a necessary change, but I think it's fine because it even though I'm talking about it like it's this big deal, changing the lyrics or whatever, it's still probably my least favorite track on the album, so it's fine. Um, everything they did to remaster it, I think makes the album better, at least more along the terms of like everything that came after Peace Cells, Rust in Peace. It makes it more on the level as far as audio quality, but as far as songs quality, it's still weaker. But I think if you're going to listen to a version of the album, it's either got to be the 1985 original or the Final Kill remaster, and I kind of prefer the newest version.
So, I had the original CD of "Killing Is My Business," the one that sounds like complete ass.
Mhm.
I also have the original album on. Actually, it's a import, a direct metal master of the original album, and that sounds great. Like I took my turntable, took those tracks, ripped them onto my computer, and then I went ahead and remastered it myself on top, kind of adding some punch to it. So I I actually have 4 versions of this album. I have the original, I have the original remastered, then I have the 2002 remix remaster, and then I have the 2018 remix remaster. Um, but that's just way too much for one fucking album, let me tell you.
No, I'm sure in 2 years there'll be a 4
Oh God, I hope not.
remaster.
So the 2002 what I don't like about what happened. So in 2002, Dave Mustaine is doing an interview. He's like, "Oh, I never liked the original artwork because the guy fucked it up and he didn't do what I told him to do, and then we didn't have the budget to fix it, and they didn't do what I wanted. So now I'm doing the original artwork the way I wanted."
He's George Lucasing it.
Yeah, exactly. Revisionist history. So he does the original artwork, but it's an actual art. Now, with the final kill, it's a physical piece of art that was photographed, and that's supposed to be his real vision. So, he had two different visions, one in 2002 and then one in 2018. And so the remix that came out in 2002 was a vast improvement over what came out in 1985.
As far as audio quality,
as far as audio quality is concerned,
and album cover.
Yes, the album cover was better. The audio was better. The drums sounded so much better. There wasn't a ton of improvement, but the whole debacle with these boots, because Dave wanted to put it on there, that's what ended up happening. With all the beeping out of the words that Lee Hazelwood did not agree with. So that's fine. A couple years later, Dave gets his bug up his ass. Not even a couple years later, it began with Killing Is My Business, and then all throughout 2003, he decides he wants to remix and remaster his entire catalog up to that point. There's something to be said about that. I mean, that is total fucking George Lucasing something. Mm-hmm. Okay. And as much as George Lucas did all that and he added to some stuff, like a lot of the stuff he added was cool. He made Tatooine look bigger. He added more of the
It's debatable. I still prefer the original theatrical.
No, of course I get it. There's always that person who's gonna want the original, and I agree with that. I would like to see the original once again, but if like the whole thing with Greedo and Han Solo, they should have never fucked with. Okay, but let's just put it that way.
We could do a whole podcast on just that.
I know, but that's kind of what Dave ended up doing with the entire catalog. He remixed it, and it was not as good as the originals in many cases. In some cases, there was slight improvements. Like there was probably some major improvements when it came to So Far So Good So What. But when you're talking about an album like Countdown to Extinction that was recorded really well the first time, or even Rust in Peace was recorded really well the first time, and then you come back in and remix it and you fucking slam the drums and it sounds way back in the mix, and the bass drum is nowhere near as punchy as it was the first time, then there's a problem. Okay. But getting back to Killing Is My Business, that's where it all began. And so, you go down 16 years later and he gets another buck up his ass. But this time, the guy, Mark Lewis, who did the remix, I watched a video interview with him, and he was talking about this. He was approached by Dave. I was going to say Dave Megadeth again.
I'm going to call him Dave Megadeth for now.
I mean, you might as well. That's who he is, right? He was approached by Dave Mustaine, and Mustaine basically gave him full control, and that is probably why the final kill is so much better than the 2002 remix.
Well, to compare it again to Star Wars, the best Star Wars movies were not directed by George Lucas. They were directed by other directors.
True. Now, to counteract that comment I just made, part of the problem that Mark had, though, was some of the parts were unlistenable. And there were other parts that had to be redone. So there are guitar parts, there are vocal parts, especially on these boots, that were literally re-recorded in 2018 or 2017, whenever it was that they were in the studio, and put on to the new Final Kill version. It's that is what total revisionist history, because now you're actually recreating something that was done in 1985, and you're trying to improve it, but improve what you have. Now you're going to say, oh, I didn't like that guitar solo. I'm going to rip a whole new guitar solo. Now you've changed the song.
Yeah.
You know what? Go rather than do that. What I would love to see, fine. I agree with you that Final Kill is a definitive edition, but what I would like to see is the ultimate definitive edition. I want the first album the way it was, remastered. Just remastered. Don't fuck with the mix. Just give me the remaster. Make the shitty sounding drums sound punchier by changing and EQing shit, not by, that's what I did to my own personal version. And then at the same time, give us the Final Kill version. So give us that ultimate. You have the first one, you have the new one. That's what I would like. I don't necessarily have to see that stupid fucking skull that they did on the first album cover again, but I would like to hear the original tracks as they were back in 1985.
No, I agree. And it's frustrating when, you don't get that, because it's, again, like Star Wars. It would be really nice to just have Blu-ray versions of the original, or 4K Blu-ray, whatever, of the originals, and not the one where they've added a bunch of shit in and changed things, and just what we remember. It would be nice.
Exactly. Like I said, I saw the re-releases in theaters when they came back out the second time, if you want to put it that way. You look for some of the nuances, like some of those little lizard horse things that the stormtroopers were riding on. I can't remember their name. I was never good with the animal names. What, the dewbacks, right? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a weird name.
What in Star Wars isn't a weird name?
They was it in the last one, they actually called them rats. So I was like, they used something from this earth in that movie.
Yeah, there's a few times and things they've done that.
So, and anyhow, there's with the dewbacks, when they were searching for C-3PO and R2-D2, when they landed and they found the ship that R2 and 3PO had deserted, there was a lot more stormtroopers on dewbacks than there was on the original movie. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is the things when you change the sequence, like
when you have
the whole Greedo Han Solo thing,
the Anakin Skywalker at the end being young, and it doesn't make sense because Luke would be like, "Who the hell's that guy?"
Well, no, it was the version. Yeah. When they take the helmet off of Darth Vader, and I'm spoiler alert if you haven't fucking seen Star Wars, okay?
It is a new movie.
you take the helmet off, and in the original Return of the Jedi, the guy's it's an old fat head in there.
Well, they
right?
never changed that. What they changed was when he was Ghost at the end.
I thought they changed his face in there too. Did they? Did not?
No, they didn't change his face, but they changed like when he was a ghost at the end. But he's the guy from he's the old man, and that would make sense because that was the first time Luke ever saw his face, right? But then in the remaster or the remake, like whatever the special edition, they change it to be the guy who played Anakin in the prequels.
I was going to say
so Luke would be like
Hans Christensen.
Yes, Hans Christian Andersen. Hayden Christensen.
I was close.
Yeah. And he sees him, and if it were me, I'd be like, "Who's that guy?"
Well, yeah, especially since did they keep the same Obi-Wan?
Yeah, the old Obi-Wan. So
okay.
They should have had all young people, and Luke been like, "Who are y'all?" Like,
no, that would have been funny if they would have put the other what's his face who played Obi-Wan.
Oh shit!
The English actor is English or Irish?
Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor. If they would imagine if they would have put Ewan McGregor's face there with the ghosts, instead of the old man.
Yeah,
that would have been weird. but
He's
it would
looking at
probably
him and
been
he's
more.
like, I'm pretty sure I know who you are, but
But that would have been pretty appropriate because they've got Hans Christian Andersen right next to him. So anyway, we total sidetracked on
it's
this thing here.
fine. I think
I
it
know.
crosses over in the middle.
Metal lore. So uh that's what I want to see with Killing Is My Business is Good. I would love to see an original version of the album re-released, but I don't think I'll ever get that. So, but I have my vinyl, so that's good. And I just realized today that I have the 2002 edition on CD and I have the Final Kill on vinyl. So I didn't realize I had bought. Now that I think about it, I do remember, but I didn't realize I had bought that when I saw it today.
It happens to me too. I go, I own this.
There's a couple CDs. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't know I had this. All right, so we're gonna get to the last band now, and so this band, and this is where the platinum award inside the sleeve comes in. Kiss with double platinum. So this is not a debut album. Yay! I don't have to eat my words on this one. This is actually a compilation, a greatest hits that was released in 1978. This is something, if I'm not mistaken, I've read recently that the band did not want to do at the time, but they were basically taking a break from touring. And not only did they not want to do it, but then they were asked to go ahead and re-record one track because the record company wanted to take advantage of the disco scene, and they made them re-record Strutter so that it had more of a groove and more danceable. So they changed the way that the drum beat went on this song. So that was re-recorded, but the rest of the album, except for one song. So there's 20 songs on this. 18 songs were remastered. One song was re-recorded, and one song was left alone. So to give the specs on this, originally released April 2nd, 1978 on Casablanca Records. Since it was taken from the first 6 studio albums from Kiss, producers include Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise, Neil Bogart, Bob Ezrin, Eddie Kramer, and Kiss themselves. Strutter 78 was produced by Sean Delaney. The entire remix project was overseen by Sean Delaney and Mike Stone at Trident Studios in London, England. Did you give this a good listen?
I did. It's something.
It definitely is something. Look, I'm a big Kiss fan. I was super excited when I bought this, and I realized when I pulled it out yesterday that the version that I bought was a cutout. So this was already discounted by the time that I bought this. So it has a little corner that's been cut. So it was probably cost $10 when I bought it, $11.99 or something like that, instead of like whatever double albums cost back then. But it had the platinum award. It actually had 2, one in each sleeve, so you get a double platinum award. I still have mine, and I looked at when I pulled it out yesterday to take a look at it. I pulled out the little award, and it says my name on it, Kenneth Dean. So this award is presented to Kenneth Dean with helping us, spread the word of Kiss or some shit like that. That's on there. So it's super cool. When you buy it, it's embossed. It's big silvery looking thing, and you get this album. And now, if you're a real diehard Kiss fan at this time, back in the day, you listen to this album and you're like, "Whoa, this is different." Real different. So, I agree with you when you say it's different. It's something.
My biggest complaint is Strutter. Why even re-record it?
That was Paul's biggest complaint too. Again, it's kind of like you're at the control of the record company. They wanted to get a song out on the disco floor, and I don't know. I mean, first of all, it's not. It flopped as a hit. It didn't do anything because it wasn't disco. It was a rock song that had a disco groove to it. I mean, I Was Made for Loving You is a better disco song.
Oh, for sure. I mean, but that was intended to be a disco song. Turning Strutter into a semi-disco song. I don't know. It's not a good version. I did see. It's always interesting to me, like the comments that people make, and this is always subjective, right? Like, there's no when you're talking about like what you like in music, the only objective aspects are things like what the production quality is, things like that. Even then, like you can prefer something, you can enjoy something that doesn't sound good because it just hits you the right way, but you can still be objective about it. There's nothing objectively wrong with the version of Strutter. It's just, I, it's like they had it right the first time. Why re-record it in a worse version?
No, I totally agree with you. It so it's like, we go back and we understand why bands nowadays re-record things. It's about publishing. It's about money. I was gonna say monetary.
It's about money. Money, 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 money.
It's about, yeah. It's about the money that they can get for the song, as opposed to what they were getting with the previous version.
Mhm.
Anybody who tells you otherwise is full of shit. Okay, it's all about money and making more money on the song that you made a lot of money with to begin with, but now because you have licensing and all that stuff, you want to get more money, more money, more money, more money. But this is not that. Well, this is an attempt to make more money. It's just a really bad attempt as opposed to a publishing change. And I didn't particularly like it, but as a kid, when I listened to it, I'm like, oh, it's a different version. I didn't really pay attention. I did not realize it was meant to be disco-ish, groovier. I never got the connotation back when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now I listen to it, and I'm like, it's not that good. But what's even funnier, for anybody who's a Kiss fan out there knows that anytime Kiss puts out a greatest hits of some sort, so you got double platinum, you got Kiss Killers, you've got smashes, thrashes, and hits. Now, I don't know about anything after that because those greatest hits albums were a little different. The ones that came after, they're more kind of just cash grabs, trying to put out this, regurgitate the same shit over and over again. Although wait, what's that? Is it Greatest Kiss? I think also had some changes on it. Each one of those releases had some form of remix versions of one or all the songs, starting with double platinum. Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits had, what what many people call an abomination of I Love It Loud, where they took away the bombastic drums and made it just sound normal. They had Eric Carr singing Beth, which Peter fucking complained about to holy hell, and nothing came of it because he had no rights over it anymore. But this version, I mean, there's a couple of songs that stand out as, whoa, they've made some serious changes. And for the most part, most of the songs are just alternate versions, if you want to look at it that way. Is any particular song besides Strutter 78 stand out to you?
I mean, for the most part, no. Yeah, there's little differences here and there. You could tell the differences on some of the remixed ones, or specifically remixed ones like Hard Like Woman. I think was it Calling Dr. Love sounds a little bit different. For the most part, this just seems like an utterly unnecessary kind of like greatest hits, I guess, at the time. Um, I imagine it sold pretty well. So, it went platinum, right? So, double
Wait, a
platinum
double.
went single platinum. Um, but, you know, for the most part, it's unnecessary.
I will say this: there are a few songs that definitely made it. There's a bigger difference. Okay, so the first one was "Hard Luck Woman." Like you mentioned,
That was
the intro
one I noticed the biggest
right.
difference.
There's two that are huge, big differences. Hard Luck Woman being probably, I guess you would say, the biggest differences, because they had the intro was changed to be more acoustic. They started the vocals without any drums, and then the whole band kicks in on the second verse. You know, besides that of rearranging instruments and stuff like that, not that all they had to do was just drop the knobs to zero, but they the remix itself, more compressed, less spatial sounding, at least drum wise. You know, the drums and bass, like I said, come in on the second verse. The vocal remix though is pretty interesting too, because there's more ambient reverb on Peter's vocals, but when it comes to the chorus on the original, it's so it's all Peter, and you barely hear. Now, one of the things that was that as a Kiss fan that we noticed is that a Paul song always had Paul more in the background vocals chorus mix. He was always higher up. The Gene songs always had Gene higher up, so that he was the main person that you could hear in the background vocals or on the chorus. And same thing with Peter, and I don't even with Ace. He was always so far behind in the mix that you never heard him singing background vocals. But on Hard Luck Woman, they really, on the original, you can barely hear Paul and Gene, and I don't know if Ace was doing background vocals or not, but on the remix, you can definitively identify Paul, and obviously through one thing or another, you can identify Gene. It is so blatantly clear, in my opinion. And I'm like, wow, I like it better because you have that, you feel like it's a group as opposed to just one guy singing. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the flip side, the drums were mixed in a way that made it seem more subdued. The song felt less enthusiastic on this remix.
Okay, I can see that. Much
like you said too, with Calling Dr. Love, there were some changes on that. They changed the original, when the original comes out, you start straight to the riff. It starts on the riff, whereas the remix starts with this Gene Simmons moaning bit in the beginning. Oddly enough, the vocals come in at the same exact point, even though they cut most of the riffing out on the remix. It still starts at the same point. So the vocals, like I said, begin at that 22-second mark, and the drums again, more compressed, less dynamic. So there's that. There's a lot of that going on the remix. The other songs that are kind of definitely noticeable was 100,000 Years and Detroit Rock City and Black Diamond. So with 100,000 Years, man, the mix, they killed the bass sound. They just flattened that puppy out, made it sound, it was almost like, how when you hear a bass guitar played with a pick, you hear that pick sound.
Mm-hmm.
So that pick sound has a particular tone that defines that bass. When I mean it that way, it's like it's not the click, but it's not very bassy. I don't know any other word to put it that way. Whereas on the original version, it sounds, even though Gene's playing with a pick, it sounds deep. They killed whatever deepness it had on the remix. The original has it's very strange when you listen to it. You hear the brrr, and when you hear the drums come in, you can actually hear the drums naturally vibrating in the studio. If you're listening to this, listen to this on headphones, crank it up pretty good until your ears can't take it anymore, and listen to that drum sound. It is so cool. And there's even a part, if you pay attention close enough, where you hear talking before the whole band kicks in. It's very interesting. There's someone is saying something in the background. It's inaudible in terms of what is said, but someone's talking. It is clear as day. So interesting. Completely gone in the remix. Who knows? It's just it's flat. It's thin. I don't like it as much. Detroit Rock City, they take out the entire intro.
Yeah, that was weird to me. Like, how do you take out a really iconic intro like that?
And then they removed the car crash at the end too.
Yeah.
So, and then they messed with the chorus. They actually threw a "get up" in at the end of the guitar solo, "get down," and I'm like, what the hell is that for? You just like killed the fucking guitar solo, you know?
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, they decided to let's go ahead and stick that really cool guitar intro from Rock Bottom, that Ace Frehley multi-layered guitar solo. Super cool guitar solo. Well, we're going to go ahead and, first of all, fade it in. Second of all, never get it to the volume that it needs to be. And third, we're going to cut a chunk. We're going to cut a minute off of this song. Like, what? I mean, they cut the part that where there's an actual octave change. They took that right out of the song.
Yeah.
So that had no bearing. Look, a minute is not going to fucking kill however many songs are on the record. It's not going to kill the time. It's 1 minute. Okay. You're already putting 5 songs on the side. I mean, you put 20 songs on a 2-disc album. You could have put 6 or 7 songs because they're only 3-minute songs in general. So 1 minute would not have made a big difference. And at least play the fucking full version and at full sound. I don't know. That was upsetting. And I'm not upset about it now. I don't care anymore. And then the other big change came to Black Diamond. Whoa, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, I don't really care for the version of Black Diamond here.
Now, you see, I do. And here's the reason why. I can't stand that shit that ends on the original.
Oh,
I fucking can't stand that.
Skip that. I mean, not on record. I mean, you can, but it's more difficult, right?
I mean, if you're listening to it on CD and you get to that point, you go to the next song.
Yeah.
If you have enough awareness. But that's what I like about the remix version is that you get to that point and then it starts over. It goes back to the acoustic intro. Okay. I don't have a problem with that. And then it fades out. I do like, though, where on the original it goes straight into the vocals, like, you know, the guitar and the vocals come in immediately. I actually like the fact that they gave it a measure of just acoustic guitar and then Paul's vocals comes in. I like the way they did that. And I like the fact that they restarted it when it got to that point at the end of the song.
Maybe I have to listen to it more because I mean I've never really listened to this until, you know, time to discuss this album.
Mm-hmm.
I never really felt a necessity. So,
I mean, I've been with this album for 40 something years, you know.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah, that's different.
Right. And
I've been with it for 40 minutes.
So, and you know, I think you and I had talked about the song. I had mentioned it, you know, like Peter Chris's vocals sound doubled, and you had heard it, and it's.
But I think that takes away from it because like his voice, like that's the best thing about Peter Criss to me is his voice. So like when he sings I like Black Diamond a lot. I think that's one of their better songs, and like I don't know, to me it took away from the vocals.
No, I agree with you. I you know, it was they either doubled it or they put so many effects on it that it made it sound like it was doubled. So there's a delay, an echo, shit ton of reverb. I don't like it. The chorus is done that way as well. You know, so there's parts of it, you know, the chorus is up there, you know, and but I think overall that whole doubling effect from Peter just takes away from that.
Yeah.
Although you can hear Paul and Gene again relatively clearer on this chorus than before. Although there is that, I still prefer this version over the original just because of the way they cut out the end. I can't, man. The first time, so here's the funny thing: I had Kiss. The first album was the second album I bought from Kiss. The first album was Kiss Alive 2. The second one was Kiss. I don't know where along the line, because for the longest time, and I'm talking several years, I used to keep my Kiss albums in the order in which I bought them. Fuck alphabetical. fuck the year that it came out. The year I bought them. Now, I only remember the first two. I don't remember what was number 3, but I had a unique memory, and I'm talking. It was probably the if you put a wad of records and you just grab a whole bunch, and it probably about 15 records, 16 records, or somewhere around between 15 and 20 albums. Especially back in the day where single albums were real thin, they weren't 180 gram. I used to keep that in that order for the longest time. So let's say several years.
Yeah.
I never really paid much attention to Black Diamond. So much so that I liked the version on because that was the thing. I listened to like Kiss. I think Kiss Alive 1 was maybe like my 3rd or 4th record from Kiss, somewhere around there. And I remember hearing the live version, and you had instead of the slowdown, it was explosions and band crashes. It was like bam, bam, and they're just trying to end the song. And that was cool. That whole fucking slowdown was just disturbing to me. When I heard the double platinum version, I'm like, oh, this is cool. I like this. I don't have to hear that shit. So I've always liked the double platinum version.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right. Well, that was our take on these 6 albums, and that brings us to our big 4. And we didn't mention anything about this at the beginning, but our big 4 tonight is big 4 re-releases. So this can encompass box sets, special editions, anniversaries, remixes, all that happy stuff. I've got a unique set. I originally told Chris today that I was not going to do any box sets, and I think I completely reversed that.
You also told us we weren't going to do any debut albums. So.
I've just been full of shit tonight, haven't I? All right. You want to go first on this one, or you want me to go first?
Actually, I'd like you to go first today.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my big 4 re-releases, I'm going to go ahead and put this as my big 4 box sets, if you want to look at it that way. Number 1 for me, or actually not number 1, number 4 for me is Def Leppard, the early years, 1979 or 79 to 81. That's a 5 CD box set that includes On Through the Night, remastered, High and Dry, remastered, When the Walls Come Tumbling Down, live in Oxford, Too Many Jitterbugs, B-sides and rarities, and Raw, early performances. So that is really, really cool presentation. It's meant to look like a used record sleeve where they have the round part on the front that has been pulled in and out of your collection so many times that you've rubbed the record into the front of the sleeve. The only problem is it's 10 inches or 9 inches, something like that. It's not a full 12-inch vinyl size box set. So I'm like, if you would have done that, that would have been perfect. But it's still a really cool set. I actually wanted it strictly for the fact that High and Dry was remastered, because they don't have a remastered edition out there available at the moment. And then again, it came along with On Through the Night as well. So that's the way I have that first album.
Okay.
Number 3 is Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, the Locked and Loaded Edition Ultimate Box Set, which is, you can get it now for less than $500. And when it first came out, it was $1,000. It was a vault looking type of box set that contains some vinyl, some 7 inches, some 4 CDs, a Blu-ray, and a shit ton of memorabilia. The super deluxe edition of this box set is basically a 12-inch sized box set that has the same audio on it, the 4 CDs plus the bonus Blu-ray. It has some memorabilia, but it's not that vault-looking box set. Both of them are super cool. I have the super deluxe edition. I got it on sale. It was like $150. Super cheap compared to the original like $250 that they wanted.
Yeah, I remember when it dropped.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've seen it like that the big box set. It's like, oh, you can get it on sale now for $3.99. I was like, oof, not a bad price for what you get, but it's still extremely expensive. Number 2 for me, Iron Maiden, Eddie's Archive. Now, what Big Four type of collection set would not be complete without Iron Maiden? This one has got 3 double discs on it. One is the BBC Archives. 2 is the Beast of Hammersmith live concert during the Beast on the Road tour, 1982. Basically, Bruce Dickinson's first tour. And then it has a double CD of Best of the B-Sides. It also comes with a family tree, and it comes with an Iron Maiden shot glass. Now, the shot glass is pretty standard, but what the shot glass is sitting on is 5 legs that have Eddie adorned on them. So that's pretty cool. And a nice little metal can display case type of thing. Very neat. I bought it strictly for the Beast Over. Well, not strictly. It was the best way to get a CD version of the B-sides. And then all the archival stuff from the BBC as well as the Beast Over Hammersmith was well worth it. And they just released Beast Over Hammersmith last year for on vinyl as part of the 40th anniversary of Number of the Beast. So now you can get it on vinyl or CD.
Very
But
cool.
If you don't have the archive, you're not going to have the CD, and that's kind of hard to get. So, but you could get the MP3s if you're out there. All right, and number 1 for me is the Metallica box set series, which is technically incomplete. Right now, they have the first 5 albums have been released in these ultimate box set editions. Each one has been getting progressively bigger. The first 2 came out at the same time, so it was Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. Then came Master of Puppets. Then came And Justice for All, which was a huge box set when it came out. I was like, man, how much bigger can it get? Oh, shit. I didn't realize the Black Album was going to be almost 50% thicker. Crazy how big that box set is. I can't even imagine what Load and Reload is going to be like because I believe they're coming out as 1 box. I mean, if they put it out as 2 boxes,
It's going to be a cube.
It'll be like the Guns N' Roses vault. I mean, if they put it out as 2 separate, I believe it would. I almost believe it would be an injustice. But if they have that much material, it would be really cool. The reason why the Metallica box set series is number 1 for me is not because I'm a big Metallica fan. I mean, obviously that's a big part of it, but I think of all the box sets and all the things that are out there that these bands and artists give you as bonus material, no one has been able to compete with what Metallica has given the fans. And each album has progressively gotten bigger and bigger. Kill 'Em All. I mean, they gave you performances with Cliff. And not just shitty performances in terms of quality, but some pretty good, decent archival footage that's been out there. Like a lot of it was on Cliff 'Em All, but now you've got the full version, which is really cool. You have some bootleg albums that have Cliff on it. I mean, everything's got Cliff on it. The book that's in there is really cool. Some are a little tiny. They give you some pins and patches and stuff like that. That's all cool. But demos and the vinyl has got different concerts, different bootleg concerts that people sent into the band. And each one got progressively bigger and bigger. Master Puppets has a lot of cool footage. They gave you a DVD so you could see some concerts. And Justice for All, they put on vinyl the Seattle concert. So now you had the video with the Binge and Purge box set. Now you've got the audio, which is killer. And then they remastered the original audio to make it sound even better. So Greg Fiddleman did a good job with that, or his crew, some of his people in his crew. And then, of course, the Black Album presentation for the 30th anniversary was insane. How much stuff came with that. And like I said, Load and Reload is going to be pretty huge. I'm guessing St. Anger's not going to have a lot, but
hey, you never know. It may come with the movie and all that other stuff too, so it might be.
If they put out a box set for St. Anger, hopefully they'll put the Presidio mixes or the Presidio songs in there. That's a thing that a lot of fans want.
Yeah, I would think they would have that. And then what was the Blu-ray?
Some Kind of Monster?
No, not the movie, but the live performance that they did.
Through the Never?
I don't think so. It was just a live performance that they released. It was like in France or something like that.
I don't have it here. The one where they were at that Coliseum that was there in France.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That had good versions of those songs on it. I mean, I would think there's a possibility they could release that with it too, or something. At least like the audio versions of those tracks, or something like that. Because they have live versions on the extra discs and stuff like that. So
right, yeah. I mean, they've got obviously they got plenty of stuff, but I'd be interested to see, because there was supposed to be there was something that they mentioned recently before 72 Seasons dropped where they were talking about, oh, you want cover versions? We got cover versions. And that was a lot of people took that as a hint as another Garage Inc. was coming out, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
That would have been really cool. But then all of a sudden they dropped 72 Seasons on everybody. So maybe with, a box set with Garage Inc., something that would be fucking cool.
Yeah. That would be worth it if Garage Inc. had a bunch of extra covers.
Totally. Yeah, think about it, the Ramones covers that they put out is not part of Garage Inc. because they came out well after that.
Yeah.
They've done a few other, they did those medleys, the Ronnie Rising medley. They did the cover for Remember Tomorrow. So there's some covers that have been released, but much like the singles, a nice one collection would be cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. So what is your big 4 re-releases?
So I didn't go box sets, but I did some collections. So I'm going to start off with Nevermore's Enemies of Reality. If you've ever heard the original, it just had really shoddy production. When they did the re-release, it sounds so much better, and they really did the album justice. My number 3 is kind of a cheat, but I'm throwing 2 in there because they are bootlegs, in a way. So I'm doing the Death Magnetic Guitar Hero mix. If you know, I'm sure you've heard it.
Oh, I have it on my iPhone.
Exactly. And the Injustice for Jason mix, where it actually has the bass on Injustice for All. So the reason I threw both of those in there was because they were not official releases, but I think most fans don't care. They're both awesome versions. I think they improve upon the albums. Injustice for All is debatable because that album is really great as is, but it is really nice to hear bass on it too.
So what's funny about the Death Magnetic version from Guitar Hero?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, everyone complained about the audio quality because they basically slammed it when it became an MP3.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that happens on the Guitar Hero version, you can actually hear the bass better.
Yeah. No, overall it sounds much better, just in general.
Yeah. So it's pretty funny.
My number 2 is Still Life from Opeth. That's another band we haven't heard much from. But the version, or the second remaster that they did, added a stereo mix, which greatly improved the release. So to me, that's the definitive version of that album.
It's a really good album, and I think a lot of people overlooked it because the original release sounded so bad. And then my number one is the Death remasters. So a few years back, almost a decade ago, or a little over a decade ago at this point, I guess, um, had all of their albums remastered. Not all of them are better. I think Scream Bloody Gore is probably the weakest remaster because it did kind of throw Chuck's vocals back a little further. But I think other than that, all of the others to me sounded really good. Especially Sound of Perseverance. I think that was the strongest remaster. But what else was really good about those was most of them ended up becoming either 2-disc or 3-disc versions, and they had a lot of extra material, including live versions or a lot of demos, which was really cool to hear because, for a band that there's no possibility of ever getting new material from, because of Chuck's passing, it is really cool to hear those early demos and other versions of things and even different vocal versions of things. So I think those are really worth the money. They sound great, and if you have not heard them, definitely check them out.
Definitely. And then didn't Death just do a live series of bootlegs that came out on Relapse Records? So
Yeah,
that was
basically they took any live recordings that they could find and released them. They don't sound the best, but
the first couple did sound okay, but then they kind of went a little deep.
yeah, and it is what it is, and they made no qualms about it. They said these are not like perfect recordings, but this is what you're gonna get, and it was mostly because people wanted it. So
Right, exactly.
it's nice to have, but don't expect perfect audio quality.
I listened to some of it, and it was, like I said, the first one that came out was kind of like a teaser, and like, oh yeah, this sounds not too bad, and then all of a sudden the third one comes out, like, ooh, this sounds like I just walked over this with my cassette, my bike.
Yeah.
So it's like, it was really rough listening. But all in all, through this series that we just did, I really enjoyed going over all these remixes and stuff like that. And we didn't really touch upon the fact that most artists nowadays are remastering or let's put it as most legacy artists are remastering their catalog. If they came out with albums in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, especially through a major American labels, their CDs sounded like shit. And most of these bands that have been putting out anniversary editions and stuff like that have put out some really good product. They've done some really good remastering as well as adding all in the bonus tracks and stuff like that. Nowadays, it's more about the anniversary editions. You got a lot of box sets coming out, like Black Sabbath has released a few box sets for a couple of albums. They've re-released, for whatever reason, they keep putting out the same fucking version of Heaven and Hell Deluxe Edition. And
Right?
they change. They put it out like, I'm like, oh, they're releasing Heaven and Hell in a deluxe edition. I'm like, you mean like the one they put out 10 years ago that I have? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And it's the same exact songs, same exact live songs, everything.
I mean, it's a fucking great album, so I get why, but at the same time, it'd be nice to have a new edition, new version, something different.
Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff out there for everybody, and I really enjoy a lot of these remasters. I'm not going to criticize one particular band that has a completely terrible remaster of their first album or their major label debut, but
Pantera,
other than
yeah, terrible.
yeah, I didn't want to say that, but okay, because the album's great, but the remaster is terrible.
No, the original is a near perfect album, and then the remaster just everything shitty that they could have done.
All right. Well, that's our big four re-released albums, and that is the end of this episode of Debating Metal. Remember, you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Podbean, and all the others. So click like or subscribe, and thank you so much for listening.
And don't forget you can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. If you listen to us on YouTube, be sure to leave us a comment and ring that bell to be notified when we post the new episode.
And remember to keep an eye out for our next episode when we spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya.